You're listening to Garibaldi Red, a Nottingham Forest podcast brought to you by Nottinghamshire Live. Hello, welcome to another Garibaldi Red summer special as we catch up with Forest fans and faces around the world. In this instance, I'm delighted to be joined by a podcaster and blogger for, I think, the biggest sports podcast network in the world in Barstool Sports. And our guest this week is from Barstool Chicago in Barstool Chief. Chief, hello, how are you?
I'm doing very well. Thanks for having me. I was thrilled that I got this call to come on the podcast. I think I've been listening fairly consistently since about January. So I found the podcast and, really love you and Greg and then Bertles. Like it's been very helpful for my Forest educations listening to this show.
Well, I'm glad to have you. Greg is going to love that you said that. I'll definitely, As soon as we finish recording, I'm going to message him and tell him that you said that. He'll be very pleased. So, obviously, you're a Forest fan, and we'll come on to all that. But I was reading up on you and kind of your journey to get to where you are now. Like I say, you're a successful podcaster and blogger and everything at the moment. It was a bit of a weird road to get there, wasn't it? Were you working in marketing or something for quite a few years?
Yeah. So I'm 36 years old, and I've only been doing this media with Barstool media job for I started January 1st of 2019, doing it full time. So before that, I had I was in beverage packaging. I was in a type of email internet marketing. I had all sorts of different jobs as I was just kind of going through being a professional. I never had any intention of doing this professionally. I, was a philosophy and economics major in school. And I just I loved Barstool when I was in college, and they announced that they were coming to Chicago in 2012 or 13. And I'm a big ice hockey fan. I know you guys have the Nottingham Panthers. So I'm a big hockey fan and a big Chicago Blackhawks fan. And I played hockey, my entire life. So I emailed them and they basically said, you can write for free on a tryout basis. And this was spring of 2013. And if people like you, you can stay. So I was just doing it more so as a hobby and a way to kind of stay connected to hockey and be a part of this. Barstool was very small back then. And then eventually I think they started paying me like a stipend of like $200 a month. That was like several years later. So most of the time I was doing it just for free and for fun as something like, a side project hobby. And then, like I said, went full time in January of 2019, and this has become kind of my career now. So I never intended it, but I've really enjoyed it and very thankful to have this position.
So just for people who aren't too familiar with like Barstool and specifically what you guys do, are you broadcasting every day? I know you've got a couple of podcasts, listen to a bit of them. Is it Redline Radio and The Dog Walk? Is that the main stuff you do?
Those are our two main shows. Yeah. So Redline Radio is I would say is pretty hyper local. We really only talk about, Chicago sports. And we have 5 professional teams here, 6 if you include the MLS, the Chicago Fire, who are in last place. So we don't talk about them often, but all of our teams are in last place. So we should maybe mix them in. And so that one's hyper local, and the Dog Walk is more national, and it's becoming kind of international. When I was over, I went to the game at Wembley and spent the weekend in London and bumped into several people who were, English people who are Dog Walk fans, which blew my mind. And then every once in a while we'll get Australians or, basically a lot of people who speak English around the world have found that podcast. So, most of our audience is obviously United States, but we're kind of growing. We talk about all kind of whatever interests us. So, it could be, some kind of weird conspiracy theory, some kind of current events. We do these on Mondays. We just talk about random things, but we do it in a draft form, and people seem to like our bickering and bantering. And that's really all that show is. It's just kind of topical news.
Is it mad to you that you make a living out of it?
I was just talking to my brother, and I'm sure we'll talk about him in a minute because he's the one who introduced me to Forest. But it's been an incredible, like this year has just been incredible. Wembley, we go to New York, and it's a really fun job that I would just do have these type of conversations in a bar with my friends. But now I just, now I get paid to do it. So I feel very fortunate. Every time I stop to think about it, I'm like, I can't believe I get to do this. So I feel very fortunate. It is crazy to think about.
Let's get into Forest. And like you say there, you've got the Blackhawks, the Cubs, the White Sox, the Bears, I think that's it. And Chicago Fire, I think you mentioned. I mean, that's a lot of sports teams to cover.
Yeah.
Why did you feel the need for more room in your mental space for another team to follow?
Yeah, so I've been looking for a long time. So, the World Cup was here in '94, and every young kid and I love all sports. So when the Olympics come, I watch curling, I like golf, I like all the sports. But I've always really loved soccer. I know it's kind of a disconnect there. It always makes me uncomfortable when I call it soccer to an English person. But I've always loved soccer, going back to when I was 8 years old, and then but we never had access to English football when I was a kid. It wasn't on TV, wasn't available. And over the years, as it became, can you hear that? We're having some kind of construction in the background here.
A little bit, it's fine, don't worry.
But I as it came on NBC like 10 years ago, and we were talking off camera before, I'm a morning person. So I would just get up and I would put on a game, and it'd be a random game. And I always wanted a team. So I loved Alan Shearer when I was a little kid. So I liked Newcastle for a little bit, but it was nothing ever like the way I feel about the Blackhawks or the Bears. It was just not the same. It was just kind of a passing, and I never even cared if they were on or not. It was just like, yeah, maybe Newcastle. And then, Landon Donovan played for Everton. So I'm like, oh, he's our American hero. And then Dempsey was with Fulham. And I'd kind of pay attention to those, but I was never a fan. And then my brother ended up going to school for college in Nottingham, and he got there and bang, COVID hit. So he had planned on going to school in England, finishing school there, and using England as like a jumping off point to go see all over Europe and Ireland and Netherlands, and he couldn't. So he was locked down, and he fell in love with Nottingham. And so we would always, he and I are 10 years apart, but we're very close, and he's a big sports fan too. And so he was there for the collapse in 1920. And so we would just talk about it. And it was like so like my love for Forest is kind of organic. So every time I learned something about the club, I'm like, that's really cool. I love that. And I love the logo, and I love history in general. So when I found out, they're one of the oldest clubs ever created in sports, 1865. I'm like, 1865, like that's Abraham Lincoln, like that. It's so long ago, and that's how long they've been playing, football in Nottingham. So it's one of those things I just kept like little by little, and then I found myself like, I'm watching the championship even at the end of last year, and they're terrible, but the games are sometimes on ESPN Plus, so I was able to watch a few. And then it's like, man, it's not on today. Well, I'll just buy the match pass on Forest TV. And so it was just like, I found myself, and then they would, if they lost, I was feeling genuinely disappointed. So it was like, what is going on here? It almost like my love for Forest almost happened without my direct knowledge. It was just like, I woke, like, I actually really care about this team. I don't know what happened. And then this past year, it was unbelievable, so I'm loving the team. I'm learning about the songs and the history and all this. And then, they bring in Cooper, and they start winning, and they just keep on winning. And it was just this emotional roller coaster that ended so brilliantly in Wembley. And I got to go to Smithfield in New York and met Dan White and all the, so it's Forest around the world, and, kind of meeting people through the internet. I love the people. I've really, like, everybody's been so good to me. And then, I feel like I'll just be friends with some of these people that I've met like forever now. Like, it's just it's unlike any club that I've come across. And it's like this special kind of community. And they have my whole heart. And the thing I always say, like, I obviously wasn't born into Forest. I will die with Forest. Like, that is genuinely how I feel. And I feel so like fortunate and almost blessed to have found like this club, and it feels real to me. So I can't wait for the season. I can't wait for August.
Yeah, I mean, I guess from what you say now, you're very grateful to your brother. But was there a while when you were cursing him, thinking, "Man, why didn't you go to school in Liverpool or Manchester?" Because Forest were terrible for a while.
Yeah, I know, but and that was always a turnoff to me about those clubs, where they don't really experience, to me, it doesn't seem like real pain. And I feel like that is part of being a sports fan, where it shouldn't be all sunshine and rainbows. And, like in America, there are people who are fans of, the New York Yankees and the Dallas Cowboys and the, Los Angeles Lakers, because they just win all the time, and they'll be fans. They'll be from, some place in middle America, but those are their teams. And we look down on those people. But then when it comes time for Americans to pick a soccer team, an EPL team, they always pick the equivalent of the Yankees or the Cowboys or the Lakers. And that's what there was always like a disconnect to me. I never wanted to be a fan of Chelsea or Man City or Man U, because it felt like cheating and like skipping, like we have an expression in America called you being born on third base, where you're like, you're almost home to score all the time. And that just never sat right with me. And there's something kind of romantic about Forest and, the 23 years without being in the Premier League, but they once had this glory, and it's this constant chasing of it. And the story is so compelling, and it almost feels kind of like like an underground band that you just love, and you're watching them they'll never get the radio plays necessarily, and they'll never top the charts, but the people who know, they're in the know and they love it. And they might be the best, even though they've never had like the true success in a long time. So there's so many things that are appealing about, even down to the logo and the colors, and everything about Forest to me just seems perfect for me. Like that's and like I said, like the people, like like we're out in London, and you can tell there's a difference between Nottingham people and London people, and I kind of gravitate towards the Nottingham people just on like a cultural community basis than some of the others. So it's like I said, it's the perfect club.
I read a blog that you'd done about coming to Wembley, and it raised an interesting point I had not thought of. I mean, in Nottingham, like you mentioned, the Panthers, people enjoy the Panthers, they'll support them. The cricket, they get 17,000 people. There's the rugby, and people enjoy them and they're fans. But Forest is like indoctrinated, and it's a hardcore thing. And is that a bit different to America? Like, the football season ends, I'll follow the baseball, I'll follow the hockey. Is it not quite so hardcore? Is that a distinction, do you think?
I think the American sports are probably as there is definitely that, okay, where it's very hardcore. Like I really care about the Blackhawks, but there's always hope around the corner, and there's always optimism around, like the sports kind of, they go in seasons. So if it's like, it softens the blow. Like all of our teams are terrible right now, but the Cubs season will end here soon. Like they're long out of it. They have no chance. But the Bears start training camp in August, and we won't admit that they're terrible until October. And then the hockey and the basketball is starting. So there's always something a little bit to soften the blow of being terrible, is that there's always something else around the corner where you guys, if it goes badly, then you're just watching it go badly for, the majority of the year, for, 10 months out of the year. So it's a little bit different. There are definitely we're very hardcore. We're such a crazy sports country. It's such a big part of our culture, but because there's many distractions, instead of just having the one team that you're in love with.
What's happened to the Bulls? I mean, I don't follow basketball closely, but they used to win everything. They've gone to hell?
Yeah, basically, they've been since Michael Jordan left, they've been essentially terrible. With a couple of they went to the conference finals one time. We had this homegrown kid, like our own Brennan Johnson, if you will, from the streets of Chicago, who the Bulls managed to get, and then he got him very close to the finals. And then it was the next year where they were supposed to beat LeBron James and get over the hump. And the first playoff game, he blew out his ACL, and he was never the same. And then the team was never the same. So they've been this past year, they were better. They made the playoffs, but it's they have no true like championship aspirations. They're just kind of right now, they're just kind of there. But in the 90s, which I was really kind of too young for, to really appreciate. Like I was 11 the last time they won, so I was like 5-6 years old when they had the initial early 90s run. Like I don't remember that hardly at all. So it's almost like kind of with you guys with your last appearance in the Prem, where we know about it, but it was so long ago that it doesn't really register the way it would now as an adult. The Blackhawks were great they won 3 championships from 2010 to 2015. So that was a great run. But before that, it had been 50 years. So there's some parallels between Nottingham and Chicago sports for sure. That was one thing people kept saying to me online was like, why would you choose them? Like they're never good. You're going to be miserable. And I'm like, I am very comfortable being miserable. That's all, like my entire existence is mostly being miserable. So I'll fit right in.
What do your friends think about supporting Forest and your Barstool colleagues who you do the podcast with?
So they're not as inclined to follow soccer as I am here, specifically in Chicago. We have other people around the company who are soccer fans. Like we have a bunch of Liverpool guys. We have two people. We have one guy. We have two Arsenal fans. One of them's from Zimbabwe, and the other one is this guy Troops, who people might know. They're both Arsenal fans, and we have another guy. I've never met him or spoken with him, who I believe is a Tottenham fan. And so everyone's been like, this is, they know I love the game, but I was just casually, I'd watch everybody, whoever was on TV, I would just watch in the morning with my coffee. And now they love, like we had a bunch of guys from Barstool came out to that day, the semifinal at Smithfield. So I was in New York for that. We had a bunch of our guys come out because there's like, this is cool. And even the Liverpool fans were like getting into it and loving it. And I do think that there's an element of, man, I wish I could just switch to Forest, because you can't capture what Forest is in these other clubs. Like they're just so unique and so special, and everybody, especially in America, loves an underdog, and Forest has that element too.
I want to ask you about some of the differences in structure in American sports. I mean, talk here of sacrificing relegation and promotion, and the transfer market for a draft system. That's like sacrilege. What do you make of it as someone who's not grown up with the concept of promotion and relegation because of franchises?
I love the concept of promotion and relegation to a degree. Like that game at Wembley, and I've been to game sevens, which is big, the elimination game when you have championship aspirations, and they're insanely intense, especially in hockey, because it might just be the one goal or the one chance. It's nothing like that championship final. It's because if you lose, you stay down, and then all of your players that you've fallen in love with are gone. And it's like the downside is so huge that it's way more intense. And so I like the draft in a way. I gotta say, so I've always been aware of obviously the transfer market, but this is the first time where I've ever really tried to follow it, because Forest is in the Premier League. There's more money. There's the loanees and all. It's driving me insane. It's driving me insane. I'm watching all the rumors. I'm following Fabrizio Romano. I'm following and trying to just, and it's like they're linked to this guy, they're linked to that guy. I'm like, I've never heard. I don't know how you guys keep track of all these guys. Like, how do you know who's in the German league and the Bundesliga, League One? Like all it's infuriating. And it's like you hear these rumors, and then the rumors go away for a week, and then they pop back up, and you don't know who to trust. I'm going insane, and I find myself, if I wake up in the middle of the night checking Twitter, because I'm like, well, they're awake over there, so I'll just check real quick to see what's up with Jed Spence, and like maybe there's like that kind of. It's driving me insane.
Let's talk about Wembley then. You came over. How did you find the experience emotionally, and just the whole thing of being over in this country and trying to take it all in? What was it like for an American coming over for the first time to see a game like that?
Yeah, I've said this on our shows and other places. I think London's my favorite city that I've ever been to. So just aesthetically, it's beautiful, it's clean. I love, like I said, I love the history. So I got up and I walked to Westminster Abbey to see that, and then I walked over to Tower of London, and took did the walking tour, and tried to take that all in like early on Saturday morning, because I got in late Friday night. Kind of got up, and then walked through the different markets and tried to just kind of look and observe and walk around along the river, and I just loved it there, like the beautiful the way the trees are, and like the little side streets, and I love the drinking culture. Like here, like everything's kind of loud and there's music everywhere. There, it's just like these old pubs, and it's just guys sitting around telling stories and jokes, and that's really more my style. And, I have this one bar in Chicago called Declan's, which is like an old, traditional Irish or English style pub with dark wood and poor lighting. And I go there all the time. And I said, there's a Declan's on every corner seemingly in London. So I really love that. And everybody's in, and the spirits were high. It was like no one seemed nervous. All the Forest people, no one seemed nervous right up until we did the Wembley way. Like once we got on that, everyone was like, we have to get locked in. Like this is going to be terrible. But before that, like there was just a sense of like camaraderie and community, and like everybody singing the songs, and the pints were flowing. It was the best sporting experience, I would say, of my life. And that weekend was just absolutely incredible. It would have, even if they had lost, it still would have been like a memory of a lifetime, because the whole trip, it was such a whirlwind. I was there, like landed, saw London, hung out. My brother came over, met up with Dan and Greg and Carl, who are, those are big, Dan and Carl are like big New York Forest supporters. And so we made it happen and met up, and we had such a fun time. And then the game went, it was an ugly game, but it went the right way. So that just made it all that much better. And I couldn't script anything better than that trip to London. I can't wait to come back. I'm going to come back in the spring, and I'm going to try to get to the Tottenham game and then come up to Nottingham for like 3-4 days. And see a game at City Ground. So I feel like I have to check that off my list. I haven't been. So I can't wait to do it. And my brother, he was there for like 2.5 or 3 years. I almost wanted to, like, if I was going to reach him or send him a package, I almost felt like I had to send it to South Bank Pub, because he was just living there. So that's, I want to experience that and have a City Ground on game day. So that'll be in March. I'm going to come over in March.
Does that feel like a bit of a pilgrimage for you then, in a sense, to see the grind? And Nottingham's got so much history around, Robin Hood and just general sense of rebellion, really. Does that appeal to you?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's part of, I think Nottingham Forest has a chance to really grab a lot of Americans there's a lot of people like me who watch the EPL religiously without having any rooting interest. And I think if they're marketed and they tell the story of Forest the right way, I think it's going to grab a lot of people, because there is like that. People know the name. They know the Nottingham name just because they grew up with the fairy tales, of Robin Hood. And that story has been told and told and told in cinema over and over and over. And so there's that kind of sort of familiarity, and they have the great logo, and, you've lost that love and feeling. Like they know some of the songs just inherently. And I think there will be a lot of American fans now that every game is on Peacock, which is, a streaming service in America that is going to carry all the games. I think a lot of American fans will kind of gravitate towards Forest the way that I have, because it is such a great story, and there is no club like Forest. So all the people who don't want to just latch on to one of the big clubs, I think they'll find their way to Forest.
What is the breakthrough of the Premier League and English football in America? Because you've got so many big sports. You've got 4 massive sports already. Is the Premier League still growing every year there?
Absolutely. It's growing the game in general. Like I think people are very excited, not only for this World Cup, but the World Cup that we're going to host along with Canada and Mexico in 2026, because we have this generation, and we're hoping it's more than just a generation, that we're going to continue to produce these, Champions League level type players, and give ourselves a real chance to be, world power in soccer. And so there's like a general excitement and growth, and the MLS has really grown too. Like that Atlanta, I think their team, I might be slightly off on this, but I think they have the 5th highest average attendance in the world for soccer. They get like 45,000 a game in Atlanta. Seattle is very passionate about their team, and it's not great quality football, but it's really catching on. Columbus does great. Kansas City does great. So it's a sport that's almost it's way down the pecking order right now for the MLS. But one of the things that the EPL has going for it is the time difference. So our sports on Saturday don't really get going until noon or later. Our American football and other sports, where the EPL, they fit into a time slot where there's not a lot going on. So you kind of get up, and I do think that I think the gambling element, as that's becoming more and more legal, across the country, people will wake up and have something to watch and something to root for and care about. And so, me, I get up at 6, there's championship games at 6, EPL games at 6, then 9, and then 11, and then you click over to watch American football. And so that's it. It really kind of it scratches an itch that's kind of empty on the TV schedule for sports, because that time difference is very beneficial.
You mentioned Nottingham Panthers earlier. I covered them for about 4 years when I first joined the paper, and I started off with a pretty basic level of knowledge, and over the 4 years, could understand the differences between the lines and dumping the puck and tactics around when you want to fight and all that kind of thing. What's your level of knowledge of football now? And are you keen to grow it, or are you not that bothered you need to know the difference between 4-2-3-1 and 4-3-3 formations and everything?
No, I mean, I would still say I'm pretty green or novice about it, but I love learning new things in general. So, I've been following the game for a long time, so I know the difference of the formations, and I'm such a huge hockey fan that I've noticed that there are a lot of similarities between the two sports structurally, in terms of how you score, where, football and basketball, you have very clearly defined plays, where in football, English soccer, English football, it's very similar to hockey, where it's about timing, space, creativity, guys filling lanes and filling spaces. So just like looking at the movement, the way people score, it is similar to hockey in a way. So it maybe hockey fans might be able to have it click a little bit more easily. But there is a lot of similarities in that and crossover in that. But yeah, I have a ton to learn. And I feel like every time that's why I'm really glad I found your podcast. I feel like you guys have helped me learn a lot. And I'm trying to take in as much as I can, because I'm a genuinely curious person. And I think I just, I want to learn and learn and learn as much as I can. So I'll be, hopefully someday I'll get to a point where I feel like very comfortable speaking. I would never like question at this point something that Cooper did, because I don't feel qualified. So it's just like, oh, Cooper did that, must be good, or hope it's good. But I don't really have, I wouldn't have a critique at this point. Or same thing with Dane Murphy, where, I just kind of trust that guy. So we'll just see how it goes. And because I don't know any better, where if something were to happen in hockey or football, I would have like an opinion, be like, that was wrong. They should have done this differently, where I'm not at that point yet as a fan.
You could have critiqued Chris Ewan, don't worry. You don't need too much knowledge for that.
He's messing up left and right. I don't know how, but I know it's bad. Somebody other guy can do it better. Yeah.
It's going off on a tangent, which we sometimes do here. What's the best sport to watch live, do you think? Because I've seen, obviously, a lot of Panthers, a lot of soccer. I've watched the Red Sox, and I've watched Tampa Bay baseball, all different experiences. Which one do you most enjoy watching in person?
They're probably all in person. I would probably say, my answer is probably always going to be hockey. I love hockey. That's been my game my entire life since I was 4 or 5 years old. So, and I would say that might be the general consensus. So hockey is the 4th most popular of our sports here, but I think everyone would tell you that in person, if you get into an arena with 15 to 20,000 people, it is the best sport in person. Like, there's a big gap. So I would say hockey. And then on TV, there's just something about American football that is just translates to TV so perfectly. The pacing of it, where, you have your play and then there's a stoppage, so you can talk about it, the replay. So everybody feels like you're constantly able to get coaching from the analysts on TV, because there's just time. So every single time you run a play, there's another 30 seconds to break down what just happened. So everybody has like an inherent deeper knowledge of football, just because the sport is conducive for that. But there was something about Forest TV and then ESPN Plus watching on TV this year, where I actually found quite unique and interesting that the camera angles were seemingly always different. You're playing Huddersfield away, and it was like, this stadium is like a little box, but the camera angles were always a little off or interesting. So that reminded me of baseball a little bit. But I would say hockey is probably the best in person. American football is great on TV, and I actually think soccer really translates well to TV too. Like I do think that they should, or I wish that they would play up the crowd volume a little bit and get it. Maybe have you or Greg or somebody with a microphone in A block and you can pick up the crowd noise and talk to people that while it's going on, or have that vantage point, because that is, I say that we need more singing in American sports. Like, that is the way that you guys support your teams and are fans of the teams in your game day experience. We don't really have anything quite like that. We might have songs like after a big play, but it's not the organic, we're going to sing this almost a cappella, the way that English football does. And I'm so envious of that, because I think it's so much fun.
So what have you got then? Is it just like Let's Go Blackhawks? Is that basically?
Yeah, Let's Go Hawks. It's like every team has like the same generic chants. College football, especially in the southeastern United States, is probably the closest thing where they have, these traditions that are 100 years old, and different fight songs and that are little unique quirks about every stadium and every team. But that's that season, you only get 8 home games a year, as opposed to 18 to 20, depending on what leagues you're in over in England.
Yeah, I saw a video. I don't know which college it was, like Virginia Tech or something, where they come out to Enter Sandman or something like that, and the whole audience is jumping up down. Forest sort of have that with Molenbeek and Tyre, but that theatre is something that you think football could benefit from, soccer could benefit from, maybe.
Yeah, and then I would say the Columbus Crew in the MLS, they sing. It's a great clip on YouTube. You guys can look it up if you're interested. But they sing like that Elvis song, "I Can't Help Falling in Love with You." So they sing that in unison, and that, like, it gives you, like, even I don't care about the Columbus Crew at all, but you watch that and it gives you like a chill, because you're watching 22,000 people, and that's like it's a soccer specific stadium, so they're the only ones. Like the Chicago Fire play in the Bears stadium, so it's too big for them. It's too big for the MLS, so it's hard to have these traditions pop up in Chicago. But Columbus Crew, they have this dedicated fan base, and they I don't know how that tradition started, but it's very cool that they do that. They do it at the end of every game. So we need more of that. I wish we had more of that here.
Yeah, people should look up that Enter Sandman one. I think there's another college that does like Jump Around or something like that.
That's Wisconsin. They do it in between the third and fourth quarter, and that's awesome too. I've actually seen that in person. That's a lot of fun. But so there are a few that do similar things, but it's never while the game is going on, like the way it is in England. So I just feel like it's a more fun way to do sports. Like, the fans are more engaged, and it's almost more about what you're doing in the stands and necessarily than what's going on the field. So it's like a mixture of both. Like, I kind of feel like you're going to have a good time regardless of the result when you go to the different soccer stadiums.
Yeah, I know what you mean. When I went to watch the Red Sox, I think it was the year they actually won the World Series after that such long break, and you have like the 7th inning stretch, and it feels like you're part of it, even if they lose. Right. They lost that night, actually. But, they won the World Series, so that was cool. Boston's really nice. I want to go back to Wembley then, just briefly. Were you kind of, it was the emotion of those last 6 minutes of injury time? Were you counting them down with everyone else and thinking, oh my God, it's so close, and we can still blow it and everything, like every other fan was thinking?
Well, yeah, and they had the drama of the VAR, the two probably should have conceded at least one of those. So got fortunate with that. And then there was a time where it's like I didn't have the stopwatch running on my phone. One of the guys in our section did, so I turned to him and asked, and I was like, this has to be 8, 9, 10 minutes. Like, what is with this delay? And he's like, it's been 2 minutes and 12 seconds. And I'm like, okay, so it was just like that time was crawling by, and I looked over at Dan White, who was to my right, and he looked like he was going to just collapse. Like, he was on, hands on his knees, like couldn't really watch, and just the stress of it all. And then, you're waiting, Samba's, delaying things a bit. And then they finally, the last kick, the whistle goes, and it was Euphoria. So it was like a gut wrenching, time stood still, an extra time there, because it was, and that's another thing I've just never quite experienced as a fan, because, there's been times where with the Blackhawks where they're up and they're trying to preserve a 1-goal lead late, but you can always just look at the clock. That there's 2 minutes and 10 seconds left, as opposed to, like, I hope that you're just waiting for the ref to decide, that's enough. So we don't have an equivalent of that here either. So it was you felt like you were like walking in the dark, feeling around for the end of the game. And when it finally that whistle blows, and it was just jubilation. It's a thing that I will never ever forget.
So how are you feeling about next season then? Because I don't know, would an American sports analogy be that Forest is kind of like an expansion team in the terms they're going to have to build a new team pretty quickly, and they're entering into sort of unknown waters because they've been away from the Premier League for so long? How are you feeling about it?
I don't know how to feel. That's one of the things that's driving me insane. And everybody was saying, all the the Forest people I've gotten to know are saying, don't fall in love with the loanees.
Yeah.
And I was like, I can't help it. I love Jed Spence. I love James Garner. I love Keenan Davis. Like, I love these guys. And it's like, so it's the fact that they're kind of like, I don't know. I was hoping you would kind of tell me how to feel, because I don't know what to make of this, because you hear you're going to have this budget and then, they sign these different players, but I don't know who they are. I don't know who Henderson is, and if he's a for sure upgrade, or what that gap is between, 17th or in the Premier League and third in the championship. And it's, and you just kind of get sucked in. And I remember I really like Ryan Yates, but I went to, we have the Globe Pub here in Chicago where the Chicago Forest supporters meet again. And we were just talking, and the consensus there, and I don't know if this is accurate or not, and maybe they've changed their opinions too, was that Ryan Yates is not really an EPL player. And I'm like, man, he can't play at all in the EPL, so it's like, I really don't know what to make or what to expect in this next season. But I am just going to be blindly optimistic, because that's kind of how my personality is. And I really do like the things I've read and listened with Dane Murphy and how, and Steve Cooper. I'm just going to choose to believe that they're going to find the right pieces and stay up, and then build on it from there. So if you think otherwise, maybe you should keep that to yourself. I want to go into Newcastle on August 6th feeling good about our chances.
Oh, I think you can. It's a trip unto the unknown, isn't it? I mean, teams historically like Leeds and Sheffield United have come up and had a good season, and their players adapt quickly. And I wouldn't write Yates off, because he's going to work harder than anyone else in the summer, and he's going to come back in the best shape.
Yep.
So, and then, like you say, Henderson, I mean, he is an upgrade on Samba, I think is the consensus in my opinion. And they're signing, as we record this, I could be completely wrong, it's going to come out in 2 weeks. They're signing the striker from Union Berlin, and they're going to make big signings, I think. So I think there's a lot to look forward to, certainly. So you were saying you think you'll be back in the spring. That's your plan and something you've earmarked and looking forward to now.
Yeah, I can't wait. So we're definitely making that trip, and we might have a little bit of a group with us. But we're going to come over and maybe do like 4 or 5 days in London. And I think we're maybe like March 11th, I want to say off the top of my head, is that Tottenham game. I'm going to try to figure out a way to get into that. Not having like a true secondary market for tickets in England, that's difficult for me, because usually I would just like, I guess I'll just pay a premium because I want to go to the game. That's just not really an option over there. So I got to find a way to finagle my way into that stadium, and then same thing with City Ground. So that is a plan. So in England for maybe 7 days, and then I've been to Ireland a couple times, so maybe do Ireland like 3 days in Dublin, and then back to Chicago by the start of college basketball's tournament, March Madness. That's kind of the plan.
So just before we finish, I wanted to ask you before. I mean, who are your favourite players then? Which ones have you been drawn to since you've supported Forest?
Yeah, I mean, the honest answer is Jed. I loved watching him play, but I loved watching Brennan Johnson. I got a soft spot for the back three too. I think Worrell, McKenna, Cook, those guys they just seem like warriors. They were just tough. When Cook was like bleeding, seems like all the time. Like he was just bleeding. Yeah. Gets a knock on his head all the time. So I really kind of appreciate that toughness, and I love James Garner too. Like and Yates. Like those were there were so many. There was just such a lovable team. And it seemed like everybody that Murphy and Cooper brought in, it was like Sam Surridge. Like what? Why? Like why are they getting him of all people in January? And then here's, I don't know how many he finished with, 7 goals, something like that. He had the hat trick. So it was just like every single guy it seemed like they tapped last year, had a little bit of magic in them at the right time. And I'm hoping to they're able to recapture that formula to keep Forest up, because it's been so fun watching them play. And I'm familiar enough with the league to know that Norwich is one of these, like, I don't want to be, I hope they're not a Norwich where it's just up, down, up, down, up, down, all over, seemingly every other year. I want Forest to be up and hopefully stay up, because and people are like, why are you supporting a championship division team? And I'm like, I'm not. I'm supporting an EPL team that's been down in the championship for 23 years, but they're an EPL team. They've just had a rough run of 23 years. So that fan base, that stadium, the history, they belong in the EPL, in my estimation. And I hope that they do everything to stay up.
Yeah, you've led into my last question nicely there. I mean, do you think if your brother had gone to school in Norwich or Ipswich or wherever, would it have really stuck for you, or is there something special about Forest, about the legacy and the story that there's been around this last year or two?
I don't think so. I think it is something about Forest with, that name Nottingham, resonates because of Robin Hood, the logo, the history. Like, no other team can replicate that. And then, his story was more than he was just a student there. He went to a game and loved it so much. He had such a great time, but he was a student, so he didn't have any money. So he ended up, getting a job, ripping tickets. So he would, work at the gates, letting people in so he's like, I missed the first 10 or 15 minutes of every game, but then he got to go for free, so that was like his, like, how do I get here? Well, how do I get to see all the games in person? I better just get a job with the team. And so I don't think that if he went to Bournemouth or someplace like that, I don't think it would have grabbed me the way that Forest had. I definitely would not have found Forest without him. But I don't think, it became deeper than just him being there, because I genuinely think it's a perfect club for me.
Well, perfect note to end on. We'll leave it there. So as ever, hopefully everyone enjoyed that. And if you did, do like and subscribe. And we'll be back this time next week with more. And if there's any transfer news in the meantime, we shall return. Chief, I hope that was a good experience for you, but thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And then, just all of your fans and the Forest people around the world, everybody's been so good to me. Like, it's not like, hey, get out of here, yank. I think, I feel like I've been embraced by that community too, instead of just, kind of giving a stiff arm too. And then, I love hating Derby, and I feel like that gets me on people's good side too. So it's been great. So thanks for having me. And thanks to all the, the Forest people who have been so kind to me in person over there. And then, on the internet as well.
Well, it's good to have you with us, and we shall be back soon. Thanks very much, everyone. We'll see you.